Welcome to Soul Night Live number 46. Tonight my guest is Burleigh Drummond from Ambrosia. Good evening.
Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Pretty good, Burleigh. Good to see you. Thanks for taking time out of your day
Oh,
today to chat
my,
with us.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. I'm here in my studio, as you can see, wall-to-wall instruments. Going crazy.
And you're out in California, is that right?
Yeah, out on Thousand Oaks, California. So
Okay.
just inside Ventura County.
Has Cali kind of always been your home?
No, I'm an Army brat. So
Okay.
I was made in Japan. My parents were both military. They married in Japan. I think I was consummated on Mount Fuji, but I was born in Fort Leavenworth Prison Camp, Kansas.
Well, you know something? I am from Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, there you go.
And my great-grandfather was the military band leader at Fort Leavenworth
Oh, wow.
a hundred some years ago.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I don't know if you ever been by Fort Leavenworth, but you know they
I
have
did.
the whole.
I finally got. For the first time, I went back a couple years ago. I have a distant relative in Kansas City. So I
Mhm.
went to. We were visiting, and I said I have to go. I have to go see where I came from, and it was amazing. Yeah.
That was it for me too. I was giving a friend a ride back to the airport a day before I was going to drive back, and I'm like, "Well, we're going to go through Leavenworth." And I'd seen pictures and kind of looked at old pictures that he had and stuff, but it was really amazing to just kind of walk the grounds where he lived and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of see it. It's really very pretty. It's very nice, kind of rolling hills and real nice,
Yeah.
laid back kind of area to grow up in. So yeah, very cool. Very
Now,
cool.
where are you? Where are you at? Where
Well,
you
I'm
live?
in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been
Oh,
down here
okay.
for about 25 years now. It's just
Yeah.
like, there's Topeka is a nice place to grow up, but there's not a lot of options musically.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there's one band that made it out of there and made a name for themselves.
Was that Kansas?
Yeah. They just happen to name themselves after
Yeah.
the state, so you don't forget where they came from. But
We
but
we
that's
took.
that's a rarity. I
Yeah.
mean, the only other cool exports we had were like Amelia Earhart and Gordon Jump.
Hey.
You remember
Hey.
WKRP, Mr.
Yeah.
What's his face? Yeah.
We toured a lot with Kansas. I think about in the mid '70s. They were having their Wayward Son, and we were still. I don't think it's before we had the commercial hits. I think we were still more proggy,
Hmm.
and but it was great. It was a great pairing. They were wonderful guys.
Oh, I
So
was going to
yeah.
ask you. I was kind of curious who you felt kind of were your contemporaries back in the
Well,
day.
man, I mean, we played with everybody. I mean, we toured 6 months with Fleetwood Mac as they were, coming into, Rumors. It was right before Rumors, and so we did that, and Heart, Doobie Brothers. One of my favorites, uh, Neil Peart's band. I'm sorry, I've had a couple glasses of
Yeah.
champagne. I've been celebrating today.
That's cool. It's, a lot of folks are today,
Yeah.
definitely. It's like a
So
good
yeah,
wave has
so
been
we
lifted.
we we did about 7 dates with Rush, and that was really interesting, really interesting. And Neil Peart became a good friend from that, and yeah, so yeah, we played with everybody, and
Yeah.
everybody it's been an influence, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, well, I was wondering how much of that stuff you guys were already into, because that first album of y'all's is I think it stands tall with some of the greatest 70s progressive albums. And
Thanks.
I was
Yeah.
curious if you guys were just kind of fans of that kind of music anyway, and it all just kind of seeped together, or, just how
Well,
what
there's
your direction was initially.
when we got our record deal, we were signed on demos that we did that were nothing like. I mean, the only song that was in that batch of 3 songs that we got signed on was "Holding On To Yesterday," and the original version was a kind of a country version.
Hmm.
Well, I keep holding on, It was like, but then, we had been writing some progressive stuff. In fact, I think like Mama Frog was one of our first band tunes to come together. And so we did about 60 demos for our first album. And Russ Regan, bless his heart, from 20th Century Fox, our first label, he discovered Elton John and Barry White and all, the whole Neil Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
So he came to our studio, the studio we were recording at, and he listened to all 60 tracks, and they were all like produced, to the nines.
Mm-hmm.
And it had everything from pop to country, and it had a few progressive tunes that we really liked, and like Nice Nice, Mama Frog, things like that. And so he heard the whole thing, and he picked out those tunes, and he goes, can you give me an album like this, Nice Nice and Mama Frog? He goes, I don't have that. He goes, I have pop artists and I have R&B artists. And he goes, you do it really well. He goes, but I don't have anybody that can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us free license to go crazy.
Well, it
So
bore
prog
wonderful fruit.
spirit came out. Yeah. And we had just seen King Crimson, at the Whiskey. So we were like,
wow.
on fire for that kind of music, right?
I don't think anybody forgets seeing them the first time. They just kind of like, it made everybody want to run home and practice, among other things.
Oh,
I remember,
their first albums still, kill me. They blow me away.
oh,
Yeah.
it was so ahead of its time. I mean, I just
Yeah.
think, and they were so well developed when they hit the stage for the first time. They, probably been practicing for months, but, it was like a new level people were witnessing.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing stuff,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I want to talk about each album. I have a little kind of PowerPoint slideshow with the album covers and stuff, but we'll do that in a few minutes. I wanted to kind of go back a little further for you and well, first of all, I'm just kind of curious, what have you been up to lately?
Well, okay. Obviously, since the pandemic, and Ambrosia has not been touring. In fact, we had to cancel 85 shows this year, which was tragic for us because we had been building and building and building. And this was actually, since we regrouped and came back, this was going to be our biggest year.
Mm-hmm.
So I've recorded several other bands that I play with, and I produce a lot. And I do a lot of drum tracks for people and percussion tracks, which is great. So, I have a studio and, I have to make myself go outside once in a while, in other words.
Sure. Yeah, me too. It's just,
well, I got the most fun thing I'm doing is my kids are here, and they're not kids anymore. They're in their 20s and 30s, but we're all here, during this period. And so my wife plays with me in Ambrosia. She's a great keyboard player, singer.
mm-hmm.
And my son is a great drummer, writer. My daughter's a great writer and, instrumentalist. So we've done this. My wife and I had a band called Tin Drum, and we did 3 albums, and we got great reviews. And so now we have the Tin Drum family band, and we're doing a streaming show every 2 weeks. On something called Alert the Globe. And it's been so much fun because my kids are writing tunes, and, my wife and I have to stay competitive. So we're writing tunes.
Right.
And it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
That's very cool. And, I've heard that story from a few people I've interviewed. John Lodge, the bass player from the Moody Blues, comes to mind.
Yeah.
He just did a whole a kind of a special single called "In These Crazy Times." Now apropos, and his whole family played on it. So it's kind of an in-house production thing. So,
yeah, that's great.
It's like out of bad comes some good, and at least we're getting some quality time with our loved ones and making some art together. So all is not lost.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Quite the opposite.
No, it's been something that I've wanted to do for the longest time, and I probably would have never been able to do had not this happened. Had not this, because we were here, and there was nothing else. We couldn't go on the road. My son's a touring musician too, and my daughter was in the Peace Corps in Thailand, and that got canceled because of the pandemic. So she's here, and it took us a couple months to go, oh my gosh, what? Let's get busy, and so it's been wonderful.
I know the feeling. I mean, at first it was just kind of like, what's the point of anything? And then after a couple months, it's like, well, if I'm going to sit around this house for months, I'm going to have something to show for it.
Yeah, there
You
you
know,
go. There you go.
so yeah, I wrote some songs myself. So and then I
Good for
started doing this
you.
show. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
and this never would have happened had I not been stuck at home.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
sometimes the coolest things in life just kind of find you.
Yeah.
Instead, you don't even realize you're going to be doing it, and then it's like
Yeah.
6 months later, it's like, well, that was cool. Yeah, okay, thank you, in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about Tin Drum. What kind of stuff are you all doing together?
So my wife and I started. So it goes back to my son when he was born. He, she was touring with Jimmy Buffett and Animal Logic and people like that. And I was doing Ambrosia wasn't together at the time, so I was doing like Jim Messina and playing with a lot of people around town and going on road. So it got to the point where we were handing our son off to each other in airports. Like I'd be going out, she'd be coming in. Hey, hi, here's our son.
Right.
And so it got to the point where we decided that if we really wanted to spend more time together, we needed to actually work together to make it. And so we did. So we started writing and recording our own stuff. And we did 3 CDs, and it was independent releases, and we got great reviews, and we're doing all that. And then Ambrosia got back together and slowly built, we had to kind of reestablish ourselves on the touring and all that. And so Mary started becoming a part of that because she's such a good musician. Like if we needed a keyboard player, well, she would learn the show and do it. If we needed, a harmony singer, she would do that. And so she ended up singing lead on a lot of stuff. So she, was kind of like our sixth man for a long time. And then finally she just became part of the band. And that became so busy that we kind of had to put Tin Drum on hold because we were touring so much, and so now we were restarting that and having
Okay.
fun.
Is there a place that people can hear
Oh
the
yeah,
music and
yeah,
pick up the albums?
yeah. They could go to CD Baby and type in Tin Drum, and all 3
Okay.
albums are on that. Sure.
And you mentioned Animal Logic. That was the group with Stanley Clark and Stuart Copeland, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's
Which
pretty
is
neat stuff.
Oh, it's great stuff. And
Yeah, I
in
mean,
fact, the lead singer Debbie Holland was actually we were kind of dating before I met Mary, and then I met Mary, and then of course everything changed. But Debbie Holland is one of my favorite writers of all time. She is one of the just fantastic artist.
oh,
So
those are great records, and I don't think enough people know about them. But I
no,
try to make a point. Every day on Facebook, I have a featured album on my profile
okay,
and I got a lot of my friends or like to talk music online. So
uh-huh.
I basically just kind of fill it with my own content that I want to read,
There you go.
and
Yeah.
it's all musical. And the show was kind of an extension of that. People were kind of like, you ought to do something on video. You talk about music all the time anyway. It's like,
Yeah.
so here it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back to the early years for you, and I was just curious, like, what's some of the first music you fell in love with around the house before you could even go buy a record of your own?
Well, okay. I grew up on military bases. My dad was a full colonel in the Army. So, my first musical experience was actually playing bugle on military
Hmm.
bases. Kid, reveille, taps, things like that. And over them, I had to go into a room with a microphone and, I played and it went all over the base. So I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 when I was doing that. So it was like pretty interesting. And then my father we spent 4 years in Ankara, Turkey. Um, and I remember the military has commissaries. That's their like shopping center. You
Right.
go to the commissary for your food and anything else. And one day I was allowed to get 3 records and 345 singles.
Sure.
And the first one was The Martian Hop. Now I'm dating myself. The Battle of 1814 by Johnny Horton.
I love that.
That changed my life. And then It's Late by Ricky Nelson.
Oh, nice.
And, so that was my first beginning of like, listening to records. And I wore those records out because those are my first 3 records that I had for like 6-8 months. And then slowly I started, whining enough that they let me buy a couple more records.
More. Sure. Well, I
But,
definitely had a 45 phase myself. It was quite
oh
a
yeah,
while.
sure.
And just the thought of coughing up $10 for an album seemed extravagant when you're like
Right,
7.
right,
You know,
right.
but at 45, that's doable,
Yeah.
So,
But finally, I mean, well, we came back to the States, and that's when I started living in California, and then I had an interesting thing. My parents split up, and my father lived. He had a commander at a military base in Pasadena, and so I lived out in Claremont, Pomona, which was like a good hour and a half away. So he would send his driver to pick me up to come visit him, and his driver was a African American named Jack, who had nonstop jazz on, and that was my education. He would tell me, every song that came on, he would tell me who was playing and why they were playing the way they played and it was like, you couldn't buy the education I got in that car going to and from my dad's work. And I became infatuated with jazz and bebop and swing. And that was my first, like overwhelming musical love. And then the Beatles happened, and then I embraced that at the same time. So it was like I had this, two-edged thing happening. I loved the bebop, but I loved pop music too. And it's kind of a strange combination. And
well,
then when I got
just made you all the more versatile, though.
well, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But then when I got into college at UCLA, I spent 4 years with an African master drummer, and that's kind of what I think kind of defined me more musically. Is I got into ethnomusicology and studied with Ala Raka, Ravi Shankar's tabla player, and Razi Badu, and people like that, and just sought out Then I just started seeking out, studying with anybody and everybody I could, from the classical end to Mitchell Peters from the L.A. Philharmonic to Freddie Gruber, probably the greatest drum teacher ever. And,
sure, yeah.
So yeah, it may not be evident when I play, but I have a lot of influences.
Oh, I could tell it. Just listening to the Ambrosia albums, for starters, there's, you guys touch on so many different styles often in the same song. And it all blends together so nicely.
Yeah, I know. And I have to say, Ambrosia was probably the greatest band to play with, just because of that, because nothing was off limits, and everything was embraced and and respected and looked at seriously. From being trying to play Latin to trying to play country to play. We all like. There was no like pushing. Oh, that's not worthy. It was like,
or none of that worrying. Oh, that won't fit into our little wheelhouse.
Well, which is interesting because on our third album, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but so here's this prog band, and then all of a sudden a song like "How Much I Feel" comes along, and and the point was raised like, wow, this is so different. You sure you want to do this? And, we were kind of like, we weren't really thinking at the time, oh, well, this might get us pop success. We need a hit,
Right.
It was more like we respected the fact that it was a good song. And
Sure.
So like any song that Ambrosia did, our whole approach was, let's try to make it as good as we can. Let's really do it well, and that was our whole goal. Not to betray our audience or anything like that.
Oh no.
But some people took it that way. Mostly radio stations.
Well, you know, people kind of look at that late 70s group of soft rockers, I'll call it, say yacht
Yeah,
rockers
yeah, yeah,
after the
rockers.
fact. And, a lot of those people didn't just spring up in 1978. They, like you guys, they
Yeah,
had a
right.
history. Like somebody like Boz Scaggs, he was at Muscle
Oh, yeah,
Shoals.
yeah,
He was playing with Dwayne Allman in the late
yeah.
60s. So it's like, it wasn't like this crop of people just popped up, but sometimes it's like their yacht rock songs are the only ones people really are familiar with. So they just assume that's all there is. And it's like, no, no. I'm actually doing a show about the history of yacht rock next week with the bass
Okay.
player from the Yacht Rock Review, Greg Lee.
Who played with Ambrosia one night? He was our
Yeah,
bass player
he's
one
on. He
night.
said to tell you hi. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
he's great. And I
cool.
just figured, who better to
Yeah.
chew the fat about it with, And I'm not really great about categories. I feel like they're a good jumping off point to deeper conversations.
Well, yeah.
But
His band is a great band, by the way. They're
oh yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I mean, they are top shelf. I mean,
Yeah,
their attention to detail is impeccable.
yeah.
They're not messing around. It's like you're going to make it sound like the record, or you ain't going to play with them.
Yeah. No,
you
they're
know,
great. They're great.
yeah.
Yacht Rock, for what it's worth, it's been great for Ambrosia.
I
It's
was
been
going to say,
wonderful.
I would
Yeah, I
think
mean,
anything
it's
that
brought
shines a
it's
light
brought.
on your music is going to be a good thing, right?
Oh, sure, and it's brought in a whole new audience. I mean,
Okay.
it's brought in the 30 somethings that would. I mean, there's all kinds of people that come to an Ambrosia show. There's people our age, and then there's their kids, and then there's their kids.
That's great.
And it's like generations come to see us, but the ones that didn't have the parents you know to lead them to us, all of a sudden they discover us on Yacht Rock, and they are devoted. They come in there, they know all the lyrics. They got their little sailor hat on, and they're usually shut faced, but that's great.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
they love the music. And Ambrosia, we it was cool for us because we kind of embraced being like the house band, and we would invite. So there'd be us. We'd have John Ford Coley. We'd have Peter Beckett from Player.
Hmm.
We'd get this group of people. We did it with Michael McDonald.
Oh,
Or
that's great.
we would go be Michael McDonald's band.
Oh,
And
cool.
I mean, talk about, to me, that's as good as it gets.
Well, yeah.
I
I
think,
mean, what a great catalog of
yeah,
songs to play.
yeah. And
Um,
you do that when you do one of those shows, and you do like 2 hours of those kind of hits. I mean, people are foaming at the mouth. They're going crazy.
and I got to point out that back in the 70s, everything was really tasty. Even kind of silly pop music was made with really great
Yeah,
instruments and playing and tones. It's almost like the cheesy tones that came later hadn't been invented yet. So it was
right,
it's
right.
like everything sounded pretty tasty. But I think the thing that kind of ties these yacht rock bands together is they all had sort of a sophisticated approach to harmony and
Mhm.
chords and production values. It's
Yeah, it was a great period of writing. It
yeah,
really was.
because
Yeah.
all those records just sound amazing all these years later. And I guess Steely Dan comes to mind, as being kind of, I don't want to say at the top of the heap, but in a way,
It's
they
about as
were.
good as you can get.
Yeah, they really were. Do you remember the first time you heard them and what you thought?
Yeah, well, I mean, da, 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 da. I'm sorry, I can't remember the
Yeah.
name. Yeah, I
Are
mean, that
you
was
reeling in the
yeah,
years?
all that stuff. And
Yeah.
then I remember we went to see a show, I think at the Long Beach Arena, and Steely Dan was on the show. And that's back when they had the drummers James Hodder and um,
Young
uh,
Jeff Porcaro, right?
Jeff Porcaro was playing drums too.
Yeah.
And that's the first
Wow.
time I saw Jeff Porcaro play. And so that was like, wow. So, and I mean, anytime a lot of those hits that you're hearing from that period, it has musicians like Jeff Porcaro playing drums.
Sure.
So it's like, so the standard's pretty high.
Oh yeah.
And, and, and for us to even compete commercially at that standard, we had to get it together. We had to be able to play. I mean, we had to play, well enough that, Jeff Porcaro would come to us and go, wow, you killed it on that record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and so it was great. It was a great period.
Yeah, well, you guys definitely had the chops to compete with
Oh,
any of
thanks.
those guys, you know.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, such amazing playing on every one of your records and the
Oh,
production. I want to talk a bit about how you wound up hooking up with Alan Parsons, but let's go back a little before that, though.
sure.
So, what are some now? You were a jazzer, and then you got into the Beatles. What did you think of some of these rock drummers that came down the pike a little later in the late '60s? You know, like Mitch Mitchell and
Mitch
you know,
Mitchell's,
Ginger Baker, those kind of guys.
I think, well, both of them. I saw Cream 6 times. I mean, Ginger Baker was amazing.
You know, he
Mitch,
had a bit of
Mitch,
that hit that world beat thing going on as
yeah,
well. You know.
he very African influenced and, amazing. Uh, no, I thought he was wonderful. I thought he's, and Mitch Mitchell, I thought he was the perfect foil for Jimi Hendrix. You
Yeah, yeah,
know, perfect. I mean, technique wise, he could have played. He could have been a full on jazz drummer and
really.
been fine. But
Hmm.
luckily, it came down. Well, I heard the story too. It came down the choice between him and Ainsley Dunbar. That's the
Hmm.
choice Hendrix had to make, and they both would have been great. But can you imagine how different it would have sounded if Ainsley Dunbar had been the
I think I
drummer?
would have missed the jazz. You know, I don't. I think Mitch has got more of a jazz
Yeah,
influence.
he made it swing. Yeah,
He did. You know,
yeah.
more than just about any drummer of that era. I think. You know.
Oh,
You
great.
could tell he had some jazz chops in there. It wasn't just rock. And
Yeah, I tell you a little funny story
yeah,
because
please do.
I studied with Freddie Gruber, this teacher out here. He's
Sure.
infamous.
He's the guy that Neil Peart took lessons from about
Exactly.
20
Yeah.
years ago because he wanted to learn how to swing,
Yeah.
and Freddie kind of helped him loosen up and unlearn some habits, I guess, for lack of a
Yeah.
better description.
But so Jim Keltner kind of went through Freddie before me, and so I remember going to my lesson like in the '70s, the mid '70s or something like that. And I was, still, finding my way, even though Ambrosia was playing and all that. And for about 4 weeks, every time I would go, Jim Keltner was hanging out with Mitch Mitchell, and they'd come hang out and watch me take my lesson, with Freddie Gruber.
No
And I'm
pressure.
talking about being intimidated. It's like, so anyway, it was great, but I think I was just so like weird, freaked out that I don't even know if I heard anything Freddie said to me. I just anyway.
And what did you think of some of those prog guys that came along, like
Oh, Michael.
Burford and
Oh, amazing. I mean, just amazing. I mean, I think Michael Tiles, the original drummer for Crimson.
oh yeah,
I mean, the stuff he played on that first album, I'm still trying to figure out.
yeah,
How he.
he was so crisp and articulate. It
Oh,
just
and some of the fills were so like crazy. Like just amazing stuff. Yeah,
really, yeah.
Bruford, just what he did with Crimson and what he did with Yes, just amazing, amazing stuff.
Yeah, that early Yes. Did you catch them back in early '70s?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We went to see a lot of it. I mean, I remember Eddie Offord once. We hung out at the board when I think Eddie Offord was mixing,
Hmm.
and one of our guys had a joint, and offered him a hit of the pot, and it was a pretty full joint, and he just went and smoked it, and he literally smoked it all the way down. And we're just watching like, oh my God. He goes, oh, thanks, lads. And he goes back to mixing. It's kind of like, oh my God.
It's not my first rodeo. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that must have been just such a magical time. Every group was unique.
Yeah.
I mean, progressive rock is kind of a big umbrella, but those groups all were very different sounding.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
all
they
kind
were.
of set the bar at a similar place and had an adventurous angle when it came to arranging and such. That
Yeah.
kind of ties them together. But beyond that, I mean, Yes and
Yeah.
Genesis were quite different.
Oh, very, very,
Something
yeah.
else, but
Yeah.
it's just kind of like good stuff is here. They call it prog. Chances are you're going to find some great playing and hopefully some good engineering too. But it's not
Oh,
always
yeah.
given. It
Yeah.
kind of depends on who it is.
Yeah.
So what were some early concerts you went to that you were really impressed? You mentioned Cream. What are some other ones you?
Well, I think Cream might have been my first concert, their first tour over here. And I remember, uh, uh, I'm sorry, I have a mental block. Get Your Motor Running. They
Oh,
opened up.
Steppenwolf.
Yeah, Steppenwolf opened up, and of course I was impressed by Steppenwolf. So I was in high school when Cream. I think I was a freshman in high school, and I went to this concert at the Santa Monica Civic by myself. Because so I had my popcorn and my Coke. And I'm sitting there waiting for Cream to come on. I had memorized the records. I think they just had Disraeli Gears and Fresh Cream, I think,
Right.
at the time. So, the stage opened up and they go, dong, and then there's like this dark blue light and it goes, you thought the Latin winter would bring you down forever.
Oh, awesome.
You rode upon a steamer to the violence of the sun. And Baker, hit the snare, crack, and all the lights just went bright light. And I bounced out of my seat, threw Coke and popcorn over everybody, and like everybody's looking at me like, what the, and I was just like, amazed, by the power of it. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you remember it just like that so clearly all these years later. That that's
Oh
something
yeah,
about the power of it all. Did you
Oh.
catch the Who back then? Did you like them at all?
I never saw the Who live, and Keith Moon's probably my favorite rock drummer. I mean, just to have that just a genius abandon, but how he could rein it in and just come up with, redefine how to play drums and make sense of it. And it's just like insane,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
so unpredictable and so unconventional.
Yeah,
Almost like you leave the rest of the band to hold down the timing. I'm gonna fly all over,
yeah. But you listen to stuff like my favorite Who song's "Pictures of Lily,"
Oh yeah, great one.
and just the way he orchestrated the drum part was like genius. And all of Tommy, and actually Ambrosia. Before we had a deal or anything, I think it's still a freshman in high school. We got asked to be the band for South Coast Repertory Theater. They did a production of Tommy, and so we had to do Tommy from top to bottom. We were the band, and that's where I really kind of, learned the genius of Keith Moon. It's just like trying to duplicate what he played. It was amazing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because that was one of my favorite records. I had an older brother that went off to college and he left behind the records that he didn't love as much as the ones he took with him.
Uh-huh.
And I remember seeing Tommy, and I was more interested in playing his records than my Kitty records. And I put that on, and there's just something that just clicked with me right away. On the cover it said Tommy the Who.
Yeah.
And being a kid, I didn't know what it's about. I didn't even know it was by a band called the Who. I had a Dr. Seuss book called Horton Hears the Who about the elephant that appears. So I just assumed it was about a Who named Tommy. I didn't know. And it's just as well because it's not exactly a kid-friendly story. There's a number of people that aren't very nice to Tommy in it, but still quite an adventure. And all these years later, I actually put together a tribute and where we played the whole thing. So yeah, we both had the pleasure of playing it top to bottom, and it's quite an adventure. It's such quite a variety in there. And some of those deep tracks I think people miss out on, and they're wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was your first kit, and how old were you? And
I forget the make of the first kit. It was something similar to like something out of a Sears catalog or something like that. And I pretty much destroyed it. And then I got a little sonar kit with a little 20-inch bass drum, a couple toms, and a snare drum. And that kit lasted me for my whole duration. That was my drum set. And the first Ambrosia album was done on that little drum set.
I didn't realize they went back that far.
Oh yeah. Oh no. So I got that kit probably early 60s. That's when I probably, because I'm 69 now. So that was probably early '60s when I got that drum set.
Hmm.
And then I got a Ludwig kit, for like $200. I got a double bass drum Ludwig kit with 4 toms and a set of congas and everything. And then I got a sonar endorsement, so I got some more sonar, and I had Slingerland for a while, and then I hooked up with Drum Workshop, and I've been using DW for,
Yeah.
and, I mean, on the road, unless we can drive it, we use backline. So
Sure.
80% of the time I have a Drum Workshop kit, and I appreciate that because I know those drums. I can tune them quick. I could,
And
but
there's a consistency there too.
there is that,
Yeah.
but it's amazing how one drum set's different than the other.
Oh,
So
just like guitars,
yeah. So especially with backline, you have to, one night you'll have just this amazing snare drum, you know, and nothing else. So you really play the what out of that snare drum.
Sure,
And then
that sounds good.
and the next night you'll have these 2 toms. Boy, these are great. So you play a lot of toms that night.
Can you talk a little bit about the way drums were mic'd in a live setting and how it kind of evolved?
Oh, sure.
Because I've discussed this with some other drummers I've spoken with in the past. I spoke to Albert Bouchard recently from Blue Oyster Cult, Neil Smith from Alice Cooper, and it's been interesting their memories of going to shows early on. I think Albert was the one that said, it's like when amplification took a big leap around the time of Jimi Hendrix, suddenly the drums kind of got drowned out.
Oh yeah,
And they had to
totally.
learn how to mic them up and get them in that PA pretty quickly
Right.
to compensate. So I was just curious your thoughts on how that all kind of evolved. And
Well, yeah, it is interesting because when we started touring, I remember you were lucky, especially as an opening act, you were lucky to get kick snare overhead.
Mhm.
And so that left a lot of definition of the toms out of the mix.
Right.
So you really had to, it was a catch-22 because if you tried to play loud enough to get through, well, you'd burn yourself out like in about 3 or 4 songs. So,
Right.
and you'd lose your subtlety and all those things. So, I mean, gradually, it got better and better and better, and thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did they start like micing up every piece? Was that more of an
Well,
80s
I think,
thing
I
or?
mean, by the time, I'd say by the mid 70s,
Okay.
it got, I mean, it got to the point where they were trying to sound as good as the record, you know,
Sure.
and so, and you really started encountering great live engineers, that took it seriously and took it to the nth degree to make it as good as possible.
Oh yeah. I remember, yeah, story of like Bill Bruford like miking his whole kit up. Apparently, I think Yes toured with Iron Butterfly, and they fell in love with Iron Butterfly's PA, and they talked him into selling it to him.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't
suddenly,
know
the
that.
Yes show took a giant leap with that new
Oh,
PA.
oh,
Yeah, that's a kind of an interesting tale. I'll have to
I
get
didn't
more
know that.
details
No.
about that sometime. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, cool. Okay. So when did you hook up with the guys in Ambrosia, and were you in some other bands before that?
yes, I was playing in a few little, mostly jazz combo things and a few, rock and roll things. I was playing in the big band at UCLA and things like that. And and then I think it was 1970. They had a little storefront on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood where musicians contact service. And so for $5 on a 5 by, a little card, you could put your name, your phone number, and what you played. And so I paid the $5 and did it. I just kind of did it on a whim. And then, a couple of weeks later, the other 3 guys in Ambrosia called me, and they called me because they liked my name. And
I was going to say I can't think of a better drummer name.
and then they came over to my house, which I lived in Mar Vista, California, and I was still living with my mom, and we formed a band. I mean, we really became a band just talking in my living room, because we just, the excitement level, discovering that we were all into the same things and excited about the same things. It just, and then I think like that weekend we got together in San Pedro, which was their home ground, and I think the first song we played, it lasted about an hour and a half. And this, you know, when we finished, we just said, you know, this is it. And, you know, it was great.
That's awesome when it clicks like that from the get-go, you know.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it's just a matter of sometimes just finding people that have similar tastes, you know, that's like half the battle, you know, especially when you're into stuff that's kind of progressive, because, you know, it's not quite as well known as the more typical classic rock, I guess.
No.
You know,
And we were, I mean, you know, as a band, when we first started in 1970, you know, we tried all the, you know, we tried to get gigs playing in clubs and stuff like that, but we were a horrible dance band. Horrible, because I mean we could get through the first verse and chorus, you know, trying to sound like the record, you know, and but it just, this thing would happen where we just start going off, you know, and you know, by an hour later, the owner of he goes, "What are you guys doing?" You know, it's like, and it was like we couldn't help it, you know, and it's funny because you mentioned Vinny Colaiuta.
yeah.
He when he came to town, we became friends, and Ambrosia wasn't playing at the time, and I was just playing with my friends in clubs and stuff like that, and you know, just Motown, anything, you know, blues, R&B, and he would come sit in. You know, he'd come, you know, because he was new in town, he didn't know anybody. He'd come sit in. I'd always let him sit in, you know, and he had the same problem, you know, because he would start playing, but he knew too much, you know. It's like, and he couldn't stop himself from, you know, going out, and pretty soon everybody's like, "Where's one? You know, where's the beer?" You know? And, you know, so they would always go, "Don't let that guy sit in." I go, "This guy's a genius." You know, and anyway, so it was funny.
Well, that's wild. You know, it makes me think of his time with Zappa. I was wondering if you had any Zappa memories being in California and all
Well,
that.
I spent like a month and a half with Zappa.
Oh yeah, do tell.
Yeah. After Ainsley Dunbar left, Ruth and Ian Underwood, who became friends with Ambrosia through Leonard Bernstein, Mass, they asked me to come down and audition for Zappa. And so I did, you know, and I was there for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, and I was still in college. I was in my last year of college, and it's funny because I was there learning Zappa, you know, with Zappa all day, and going home and then memorizing charts and trying to go back the next day and play, and I literally forgot that I was in college. I forgot.
It's like going to a different college.
I didn't show up for my finals or anything. Because, you know, I was doing what I wanted to do. So, so I got, that was wonderful. And then Ambrosia got offered the deal right during that period. And I went to Frank and I said, you know, "Frank, my band Ambrosia's been offered a record deal." And he goes, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Well, that's your band, right?" And I go, "Yeah, that's my band." He goes, "That's your band, right?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You got to go do your band." He goes, "I can get anybody to play in here." He goes, "Go do your band." And it was like, yeah, okay, you know. And I found out later that he did the same thing to Lowell George.
Oh yeah.
Lowell George was playing with him, and Lowell George came in one day and said, "Frank, I wrote this song. Can I play it for you?" Frank goes, "Yeah." He goes, and the song was "I'm Willing."
Right. Yeah.
And he played for Frank, and he goes, Lowell, he goes, "That's great. You're fired. Go start your own band."
Yeah. Oh,
And
I Frank was, a straight shooter, and I'm sure a song about weeds, white, and wine didn't exactly, endear him.
Well, no, I think he just appreciated that Lowell's talent deserved to be centered around Lowell, not around him, not around
Yeah,
Frank. You know,
yeah,
and I don't think I admire. I don't admire many people as much as I admire Frank Zappa.
yeah.
He,
He's just
he's
his
incredible.
own stratosphere. He's
Oh, just
he
yeah.
gets kind of lumped in with the prog rock crowd, but he was something other than that.
No, he's yeah.
But he was so many things. Just
Yeah.
such a long career and such a body of work. There's just touches on so many styles and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, prog rock is kind of selling him short in
Oh
hindsight,
no, no, you're right. You're right.
because it's kind of like he's bigger than that.
Right.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you got together with Ambrosia in 1970. Did you have the name right off the bat, or did they already have it before you joined?
Yeah, they did. They
Okay.
had it because they had a name, and Joe Puerta, the bass player and singer in Ambrosia, had picked a name. It was called Ambergris Might, and it just happened that another band came out with that title.
What are the odds?
And so Joe looks in the dictionary, and the next word under Ambergris Might is Ambrosia,
Okay.
and the nectar of the gods.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty bold name to put on your band. It's almost like you better deliver the goods with a name like that. And you guys obviously did, but
Yeah, we
it
tried.
almost
Yeah.
seems kind of like a bold move,
Yeah.
but a great name. Now, I gotta ask, it's also kind of a dessert.
Yes.
Do you like that dessert?
Oh, I don't dislike it. I think if you look in the dictionary now, it might say something like a mixture of fruit and nuts.
Yeah, I think it is, and
Yeah,
coconut.
yeah. And if you go to England, it's rice pudding. It's the leading brand of rice pudding. But we don't feel bad because Toto in Japan is toilet seat. So it's like
This is true. It's like you
yeah,
just never know what you may
yeah.
pick and how it plays out elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But that's a great name, and I think it's fitting for what y'all are doing. I thought it
Uh-huh.
was
Thanks,
yeah,
thanks.
definitely.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned a bit about some of the groups you toured with back then. Could you tell us a little more about that? It was such an interesting list you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, hey,
hard.
before that, let me ask
Yeah.
this. Between 1970 and 1975, when you made that first record, what kind of went on in that time frame? Trying to
Well,
find a deal and stuff, I would think.
I mean, we were writing. We were still we were all going to college, so we were all busy doing that and playing whenever we could.
Hmm.
But it was kind of interesting because we tried commercial routes and things like that. We ended up but we also discovered that when we played the music that we really liked, this mostly the stuff we wrote and a few songs that really appealed to us. Um, uh, we would play venues like, say, the San Pedro Free Clinic, or do these kind of benefit shows where we had our crowd, and we really kind of discovered, yeah, we're a really good live band when there's people that want to see us.
Sure,
They don't necessarily come to hear their favorite um, pop tune, you know.
sure.
So, and that's when we kind of became, convinced that we had something going on.
Did you do some covers and a mix of originals early on?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, one of our big showstoppers was, but we did a lot like Yes did, where we took a cover and we totally did
Twisted.
our own arrangement of it. Like we
Yeah,
did
in a
songs
good
like
way.
"Feeling Good" by Traffic, and we did a lot of blues tunes that we kind of wrote, but you could tell they were influenced by, popular blues tunes.
Well,
Like,
yeah, is it safe to say that you had kind of an R&B kind of
uh,
roots, and then
yeah,
those kind of came to
well,
the fore in the late 70s on some of your bigger hits?
well, that's another story. While we were doing our first two records, which were prog-ish,
Yeah.
we were in the studio during the day, but we had to make a living. We had to, make enough because we weren't making big salaries or anything like that. So we played a women's gay bar at night, which was 1 block away, and that was R&B all night. That was like 4 hours of R&B. So we would be playing this R&B at night and doing the prog during the day.
Okay.
So slowly, you know, the influence of playing the R&B started creeping into some of the writing. Like some of the early things were like Dancing by Myself, How Much I Feel, Biggest Part of Me, Living on My Own. You know, that all kind of came from playing, you know, I mean, we were just influenced by what we were playing, you know, to eat. And it also really was a great education for us in the art of the groove, you know, playing grooves that made people dance, you know, so it was a great learning ground for that. You know, and it has helped me tremendously, you know, with studio work, because now I have that whole history, you know, that I've experienced, and, you know, I know what to do, you know, I know what any song needs to, you know, to be complete.
Lots of options.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you wind up landing the deal? And
well, so as long as we auditioned, so we got an audition for at A&M with Herb Alford.
Sure.
And so Herb Alford, he gave us money to do 3 demos, and one of those in there was Holdin On To Yesterday, but that was the country version.
All right.
So Herb passed on us, and then we had a friend, an engineer, that was playing the tapes in another studio out in the valley called Mama Joe's Studio, and the owner of the studio heard that, and he, you know, started asking, like, who is this and what is this? And he happened to know Russ Regan at 20th Century Fox, and he took those recordings to 20th Century Fox, and Russ signed us, and that was our first deal. I think that was in 1974, and then I think our first record came out in 75.
Okay.
Or something like that.
I think it's 75. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very cool. Well, you know, I had a question in the chat room. My friend Paul Watson is a big Ambrosia fan, and he was kind of curious, and I think we kind of talked about this already, but he might have missed it. He said, were there any internal discussions moving Ambrosia from prog to AOR, or were you all on board for the 80s anyway?
Well, I mean, we didn't know the 80s were going to be the 80s, you know.
Right.
Yeah, but we were just writing tunes, and Dave came in with that tune, and you know, I mean, we couldn't deny that it was a good song. I mean, you know, some people were more excited, some were less excited, but the bottom line is we voted on doing that tune, so we did it, and you know, it opened. I don't really look at it like oh, it ended our prog career, because we still kept doing prog tunes on every album.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, so to me it maybe opened up the band a little more, so that by the time we did Biggest Part of Me, you know, it was more acceptable, or whatever. You know, it was acceptable to have a little prog and a little pop at the same time. Sure. I've always said Ambrosia was a prog rock pop band. Right. You know, and because I thought that's what we were.
Is there such a thing as yacht prog?
There's a lot of. We got to play on the Yes cruise, and that was interesting, because we turned out Ambrosia was one of Yes's favorite American bands. So they asked us to tour on their yacht cruise, their Yes cruise.
The Cruise to the Edge, yes.
Cruise to the Edge, you're right.
That must have been a lot of fun. And there was lots of prog acts on that one.
Oh yeah, Carl Palmer and people like that. Yeah.
So that must have been a lot of fun. How is it playing on a boat like that? Is it?
Oh, it's wonderful.
You don't feel like your cymbals are swaying as the.
Yeah, there was a couple times where, you know, you'd be in the middle of like a storm would happen, and you'd be outside playing.
Right.
But, you know, but in general, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, those are fun, and it seems like the prog festivals have kind of gravitated to the boats in the last 5 or so years.
Yeah, right.
And there's still
Yeah.
some that happen on land as well. There's a really old one called Prog Day out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the boats, and there's not just the Prague, the Yes boat. There's some other ones too. I forget Moody Blues had one, and some other
We've
folks.
done that. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
done that many
So
times.
I'm guessing you kind of tweak the set list accordingly. Like they were on a Prague cruise, we're going to play all of our earlier stuff, or there.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, more so. But um, we still get invited once in a while to play a prog festival,
Sure, I'd
and
love to see you there.
they ask us to play everything except the hits.
Right.
And that's fine with us
Sure.
because we love the prog stuff just as much. So I mean, when we really get into it, we're still a prog band at heart.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree, definitely. Or even the word fusion might come up occasionally. You know,
Yeah. I
a
mean,
little fusiony. You got the chops to be fusion, but
yeah,
not
I've never
wank.
really thought of us as fusion, but
Yeah.
prog, yeah.
Yeah. When you guys you're too well arranged to just be.
I mean, I respect fusion. I totally respect it.
Yeah. Did you ever catch like Mahavishnu or
oh
anything like
yeah,
that?
sure,
Oh, that must have
sure.
been pretty
Weather
cool.
report, all of them. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great.
Such an amazing time to just to
Yeah,
see live music. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Well, I thought I'd take a peek at the albums and talk a bit about where they were recorded and some of
Sure.
the key tracks on them, and maybe even a few overlooked ones that are some of your faves. So
Fine.
let's see here, I'm going to do a little
Yeah.
screen sharing here, and you should pop up in the corner of the screen there. There we go. Alrighty, yeah. So, like I said before, it's Soul Night Live number 46 with Burleigh Drummond from Ambrosia. And, I mentioned Soul Night Live. SOAL stands for Story of a Life because these shows are kind of semi biographical. So, very cool. All right, 1975, the debut album. Now, this one was engineered by Alan Parsons. Am I right?
So it was mixed by Alan Parsons.
Oh,
It was
mixed. Okay.
yeah, it was engineered by Chuck Johnson and Billy Taylor,
Okay.
two great engineers. And Alan, uh, we had a guy named Gordon Perry from the London Classical Division that became kind of our mentor. And he walked in one day with Dark Side of the Moon as we were finishing this album and said, "This is the man that must mix your record." So we looked on, the credits, and so we called Abbey Road and asked, "Is Alan Parsons there?" And he goes, "Speaking." He just happened to be there working late, and he was the only one there, so he answered the phone. And turns out he was coming over for the Grammys for Dark Side of the Moon, and he came by the studio, heard our rough mixes, and said yes, he would be delighted to mix our record. So then he went on to be nominated for 2 Grammys for this record. So yeah, and then he produced and engineered our second album.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, what can you tell me about this cover art here?
Well, that's kind of that's when you have communal input into an album.
Sure.
So it's something that started off simple and just kept being added to the. I think we ended up finally calling it the War Mask of the Aztec Dead. There really is no rhyme or reason to it. It's just that's probably what the inside of the minds of Ambrosia looked like at the time.
Okay. Well, that's a compelling piece of artwork.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, you brought up a few of the tunes. I was just kind of curious. Nice, nice, very nice. That's the opening track, and kind of a really proggy way to get things rolling. I was kind of curious how that tune came together originally.
Yes. That was it was originally called something else, but Joe walked in one day. He was reading Cat's Cradle, and Kurt Vonnegut, and he came across the song of Bokanon, which is in that Cat's Cradle, and the lyrics of the song of Bokanon fit "Nice Nice." That's where "Nice Nice Very Nice" came from, and we used Kurt Vonnegut's. He became our first verse. Then Joe wrote a second verse, and that became the lyrics to Nice Nice. And we finished the record, and it was like days before I was going to go be mastered. And somebody in the studio goes, "Hey, that's nice that Kurt Vonnegut let you use his lyrics." And we just looked at each other and go, "Oh no, nobody asked Kurt Vonnegut." So, you know, it was like he had to do this total emergency, get a hold of his lawyers, and turns out he was more than happy to let us use his lyrics, and we became friends with him, and it was wonderful. Yeah.
All worked out for the best then.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's great, dear. Now, how do you put some of these songs together? Was it kind of a communal thing where you all put parts in there?
Very much. I'd say this is the purest Ambrosia record, where everybody gave everything they had, you know, to the project. You know, it was all for one for all. It really was the most beautiful experience recording. You know, everybody wrote lyrics, everybody contributed to every song, everybody had a contribution. And I think that's why it came out the way it did. Yeah.
Now, did some of these kind of evolve over time, or like you kind of would write them and play them live and eventually they got recorded, or?
No, I don't. I think they were all recorded before we ever played them live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah. And, you know, this album to me really shows the different influences in Ambrosia, like say from a pop tune like World Leave Me Alone to, you know, Mama Frog with the avant-garde influence of Tony Williams. You know, we were trying to be Tony Williams' Lifetime, you know, playing, and, you know, Make Us All Aware kind of was like kind of, you know, brought in some of the ethnic influences. And so, yeah, it really, you know, it really was Chris North, I think, did some brilliant keyboards. Just Make Us All Aware is some of the, I think, most brilliant keyboard playing on any record.
Oh, yeah, that's a great tune. How about Time Waits for No One? What do you remember about that one?
Well, you know, we love that meter. We love 12/8 or 6/8 playing in that meter. And yeah, to me, some just brilliant lyric writing with Joe and Dave on, you know, time twixt the two tells the tale that, you know, transpires. I mean, all that kind of stuff. It was just great. Yeah, wonderful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Holding On To Yesterday, that goes back pretty far.
It does. Okay, so Holding On To Yesterday was a country tune, and we were getting, we used to play records, you know, in one of our bedrooms. We had a rental house we lived in while we were recording. And one night we kind of challenged each other to bring in the best time, because, you know, we were obsessed with playing good time at that. You know, we didn't have click tracks or metronomes or anything like that in the studio. You had to play it, you know, and it had to feel good from top to bottom. And we were trying to show each other what we felt was the best time. And I brought in The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. And I said, why don't we try, we had tried Holding On that day in the studio, and it wasn't clicking. And I said, why don't we try to play it like we're backing up B.B. King? And so the next day we went in and played it, and it just happened. We tried to play it like a blues tune, and that became Holding On To Yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that really clicked in that format. Did you feel like you had a hit on your hands, or was it kind of?
I don't think we were thinking in that vein, really. We were maybe a little naive at that point to think, oh, okay, what's the single going to be? We were just trying to create an album.
Sure.
And but it did really well. It did really well for us, and we're really proud of it. And yeah, so.
Oh, I think it's amazing. It's an amazing album, and just such a joy to listen to. It's so beautifully recorded, and there's so many textures and colors on it. You know, it's quite the feast for the ears.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And so when you went to tour for this album, who did you tour with?
Okay. Wow. That's a good one. Well, we did a lot with the Beach Boys. We were the opening act for the Beach Boys for a while.
Pretty neat combination. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What kind of
And
shape were they in at the time?
well, my friend that I went through high school with, Billy Henchy, who was originally with Dino, Desi, and Billy, uh, his sister married Carl Wilson. So, I already had a friend, in the Beach Boy community. So that's not why we got to open for them, but it was a great experience because they were very receptive to what we did, and and it was wonderful. And uh, that's a good question. Though I'm not. Um, I think we did everybody from Robbie Montrose to oh, you name it. Yeah, everybody. Rory Gallagher, all kinds of strange. Uh, um, yeah, I've
Quite
lost
the
it.
list. Quite the list. Yeah. Okay.
Oh
Well,
yeah, yeah,
all right. Well, moving ahead here. So the next album,
yeah.
the next year.
I think I think you can look at us and tell we're all pretty stoned there on that picture.
Very serious. Very serious. Now, this album, the way it's put together, just the packaging was very unique. And, I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but, it folded out into this sort of pyramid.
Right,
And
and
I'm thinking,
that kept your pot stronger longer and your razor blade sharper
I was
longer.
going to ask about
Yeah,
that because it's
yeah,
so right along the time of Chariot of the Gods, that
yeah. Pyramid power, right there. There it is.
exactly. Yeah. And In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, remember that show?
Yeah,
Talking about all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's right of that time period.
yeah,
And just a really interesting way to put an album together, just,
yeah.
I mean, you remember the first time you opened up the box and saw those for the first time and put them together?
Yeah, it was pretty. It was fun. It was great.
Yeah.
It was a great time, and hats off to 20th Century Fox because obviously packaging like that cost a little more. So um, they let us do it, and I'll appreciate that about
Yeah.
them.
Well, I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like it's a wonder Dark Side of the Moon didn't think to do this with their prism on the cover.
Right.
It would
Right.
have been very much in line with that. So tell us about writing and recording this particular album. Where was this
Okay.
one recorded?
Yeah. I mean, this album was great. I mean, Alan engineered it and produced it, and I think the standout track on this, I mean, I appreciate them all, but the standout track to me is Dance With Me, George. And so for me, that was a real highlight because um, there's quite a bit of percussion on and drums on that track. And so what we did, we set up all the percussion and the drums in this big garage that was attached, not attached, but actually about 50 yards away from the studio, and ran cable to it. And I invited Ruth Underwood from Zappa to come play with me. So she played the marimba parts on that, and we did the entire drums and percussion track, which is really intricate, live. We
Oh,
did it
wow.
all in one take. We were running around the room to get to it, different instruments at different times, and so it was great. And that's one of my fondest memories, playing with Ruth Underwood.
Oh, I can imagine. Well,
Yeah.
she's just amazing and such a neat
Oh yeah.
person. How about the title track? What do you remember about that one?
I remember, everybody writing lyrics for it, with Joe and Dave, uh, and I think it's something. It just opened up such a world of possibilities. Just the somewhere I've never traveled concept. And yeah, it's like all Ambrosia tunes. It's like they just are very, to me. Uh, they have the possibility of going anywhere, and they usually do.
I like surprises.
Yeah, yeah.
That keeps you on your
So
toes.
yeah.
What were some tunes from this track that really went over great live?
Um, okay. Um, well, somewhere we still do.
Hmm.
We do somewhere live still. That's one of our tunes. Um, name some of the. Can you tell me more of the songs that are on this album?
I need to check that myself. I'll give me just a second here.
One of my favorites that we very rarely played that I liked was "We Need You Too," but we don't play that live. Heart to Heart's on here.
Let's see.
I'm pretty sure Heart to
Well,
Heart,
well, we
which,
got stuff like the Brunt.
okay, the Brunt we do live.
Okay. And
Yeah,
I Want to Know. And
we've done that. Yeah, that's a
Cowboy
great state.
Star.
Cowboy Star is great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, Running Away. Light little acoustic tune.
yeah, it's nice. Those nice tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff. And do you remember who you were touring with for this particular one, or is it
I think this is when we toured with a lot with um,
Fleetwood Mac?
Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, this was
Yeah.
the Fleetwood Mac era, and they were just coming off of "Over My Head," that single, and they
Hmm.
were playing tunes. They were playing "Landslide" and stuff like that, but I don't think it had been recorded yet.
Were
So,
you into any of their previous stuff back when they were like with Bob Welch and that
yeah,
previous
sure,
era?
yeah, and Ambrosia got to play with Bob Welsh. We backed him up.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, yeah,
Something like
he's
that.
he's really kind of forgotten in their history a lot of times, but there's
Yeah,
5 great albums with him on them. It was
yeah.
kind of the lost period, but I think there's some wonderful music in there.
He was great.
Yeah.
I have to say though, I mean, Mick Fleetwood became a huge influence to me. I mean, it's like he kind of made me rethink my whole. After touring with him for 6 months or so, I kind of changed my whole concept of trying to show how much I could play to almost showing how little I could play and make it happen. You know what I mean? I
Okay.
mean, not that I went that far, but he really, really impressed me with his feel and his groove. Just I don't think he's given enough credit as a drummer. I think, a magnificent drummer.
I think you're right. Yeah, he comes
Yeah,
up with some very interesting beats too, like that one on
yeah,
that tune "Hypnotized." That's almost like backwards or something,
yeah,
but it works.
yeah.
Great stuff. And where did you record this particular album? The second?
So this is the same place, Mama Joe's in North Hollywood in the San Fernando Valley in L.A. But the orchestra stuff was done, I think, it was done in London. I don't know, I can't remember the name of the studio, but all the orchestra stuff for A Dance with Me, George, and Cowboy Star was done there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great record. Great record.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, and this next one's a little different. It seemed like maybe you guys are trying to tighten up some arrangements a little on this. Would you say that's right?
Well, okay, so you can see we're a three-piece here.
Yeah. What
Uh,
happened with your keyboard player?
yeah, so Chris kind of took a leave of. He never really left. He he couldn't really handle the business of being in a band. I think he just had to get away from that. Uh, he still showed up and played on practically every song. Um, we had the great keyboard player from the Jazz Messengers play with us on a
Wow.
couple tunes. If Heaven Could Find Me and Apothecary. And I think Apothecary is a standout. This is a great album. One of Joe's tunes is one of my favorite Ambrosia tunes called Heart to Heart.
Hmm.
I think it's just beautiful. Dancing by Myself's on here. And of course, How Much I Feel. Uh, Heaven Could Find Me. That came off pretty good, I thought. So
What do you remember about the title track?
what I remember, we went in to record it, and this was the first one that we tried to cut to a click. This was when the clicks were coming into the studio to play it perfectly in time and things like that. And so the band tried to do it, and we couldn't do it. As a band, we could not play to the click and stay with it. So I said, can I just cut the drum track by myself to the click track? And everybody's going, what? Come on, and I said, just let me try it. So it worked. It was like, for me, it was easy to cut to the click. And then, so this is the one tune everybody overdubbed one person at a time.
Hmm.
to get that. And so it was like a real experience. It was like nowadays that's commonplace, but back then it was, unheard of.
Oh yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive. And this, this album does this kind of feel like a transitional record in a way, kind of transitioning from your more ambitious proggy stuff to a more concise kind of R&B yacht
Um,
stuff?
yeah, I'd say the band, well, just to the fact that Chris wasn't, the band was less of a brotherly love situation at this time, and that happens to bands.
Oh yeah.
So there wasn't that much where we were, how do you put it? It's like we weren't uh, in the same headspace that we were back then. During the first two records, this was more the headspace like you wrote a tune, you brought it in, and if you wanted any writing credit, you had to bring in a song. So, that was kind of like, you're on your own kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
So,
I mean, we still contributed to each other's songs, but it was less. I don't think we weren't all living in the same house anymore, and things like that. You know what I mean?
right. Well, it's like time and money and a lot of things really change the dynamic of a band, success.
Yeah.
It's
You know what? I think when it came down, I think the publishing is what kind of started being kind of a thorn in Ambrosia's side. It wasn't like the bands I've seen handle this the best about being in a band is like when you split things evenly,
hmm
it is like everybody seems to keep that creative input coming because they realize the more they put in, the better it's going to be. When one person or two people start making 70-80% of the money, and and then you start feeling like your contributions aren't as valued. Some people start feeling like they're not appreciated.
Sure.
And so I think that kind of sets a tone in a band. So I've always felt that way about bands. It's like if you have a band, be a band. If and then if you feel like you need more, do a solo album do your own solo album, and then but when you're in a band, be in a band.
Yeah.
But that's naivety on my part. So
Well, in the perfect scenario, yeah, that's great. But yeah, everyone's a different
yeah,
situation. Yeah, definitely. Do you remember anything about the tune "Art Beware"?
yeah, sure. I mean Joe Puerta is one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite lyricists, and he trying to pull. I mean, you think about that. You listen to that track. That track's not easy to play. None of the Ambrosia tracks are easy.
No.
I think I should go seek therapy to recover from all the Ambrosia tracks. But I think it's just Joe can write some brilliant songs. So, yeah,
Yeah, there's a really great vocal blend on that too. It's almost dissonant at times.
yeah, it
So
is.
so
It is.
delicious, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like, there's nothing new under the sun, Is that kind of a look at contemporary music at the time and kind of commenting on that, you think, or?
Yeah, it's a bit of a sarcastic, uh, you know, about art in general.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, it's a great record. I my band opened for a guy that played with you guys, Robert Berry.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, Robert
Yeah.
came to town last October, and we had kind of a prog night with another local great band. These guys in their 20s, friends of mine, called the Great Wide Nothing, and my band played. And then Robert came out, and the first song he played was "Life Beyond L.A."
Wow.
Yeah, so he kind of like mixed in some of his favorite songs from bands that he played with.
Oh, cool.
And then he redid some tunes like Jethro Tull did like a new version of Minstrel in the Gallery, and he did a version of Roundabout that was tuned down a step and kind of dark and mysterious. Yeah, so yeah,
Wow.
it was interesting
He's a
But
very talented guy.
yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But as I, that song was stuck in my head. You
Yeah.
know, it's like I've heard this before, but now I know who it is. You know, so
Yeah.
I went out and got the record, and I just fell in love with it. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely great. Now, this one had one of your breakthrough hits on it, right?
Yeah, how much I feel.
Right.
You know, and you could tell kind of by the way we're dressed on, you know, I mean, we were, I don't know, we were kind of, you know, I think we were searching a little bit, you know, like, what is our image? What are we, you know?
Mhm.
And so, you know,
Can you talk a little bit about the other guy's musical influences as well? You know, I got to say, David, I think, is an incredibly underrated guitar player.
oh, he
You know,
is.
people always think of him as a vocalist, but man, every solo on your records is just perfect. You know, like I was just wondering, did he like improvise all those, or were they kind of crafted in advance? Kind of.
I think, yeah, I think he crafted the solos in the studio and in, you know, rehearsals for the studio. He refined what he was going to do, you know, and conceptualized it. Um, but I do remember like when we cut Apothecary on this record, you know, Lee Ritenour, you know, we asked Lee Ritenour to come in, yeah, you know, and you know, because we didn't know Dave's ability as a jazz guitar player, and you know, Lee watched Dave play, and you know, after about a half hour of Dave playing solos on Apothecary, Lee just said, "Man, this cat's great. You know, you don't need me." Yeah, and he was absolutely right. Dave is a phenomenal musician, guitar player, singer, writer, everything.
Yeah, that just really
Yeah.
stood out to me. Is like every solo on your songs just kills. They're so they always take the song to the next level, and
Oh, well, thank you.
guitar solos don't always do that. So I could tell that a lot of thought went into
Yeah,
making them note perfect, and I appreciate players like that. There's
yeah, absolutely.
who were some of his guitar influences? You know?
Boy, you know, I can't really say specifically because Dave was such a strange combination. He had a great classical background, great classical education, but he also, you know, was huge on the Beach Boys and the Beatles, of course. Joe was more the Rolling Stones guy, you know.
Mhm.
So we really got the history of rock between the two of them. You know, they were the history of rock and roll, and it was
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Who were some of Joe's bass influences?
I think he really appreciated Jocko, you know, for
Oh, yeah.
what Jocko could do. But Joe is a guitar player. I mean, I think at heart, Joe is a guitar player that is just happens to be a great bass player, you know, and because he plays such melodic bass, you know. I mean, Joe's not the guy that just goes doom 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 doom. You
Right.
know, I mean, he more times than not, he plays a more interesting line than the guitar player does. You know, so you know, like Joe's like just extremely creative. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Great playing.
yeah.
Absolutely. And how about your vocal blend? Was it often a three-part thing between the three of you, or how did that get parsed out usually?
Well, you know, I was kind of the last of the three to be invited to sing. If they could do it, I mean, they really developed the blend between them. You know, they became the Lennon and McCartney blend. You know, in Ambrosia, and you know, I was kind of like the Harrison guy. You know, I had my one or two songs per album, and but you know, but they wrote a lot together, Joe and Dave, especially lyrically. So, you know, uh, but they, you know, again, the Beach Boys are a huge influence vocally, and
Mhm.
you know, of course, the Beatles. But you know,
And
yeah.
how did Dave and Joe meet originally?
They were the first to be in a band together. I think a band called Punksy or something like that. And they found Chris. They were looking for a keyboard player and found Chris and went to a rehearsal of another band. And Chris was there with his organ and had a bottle of wine on his organ and a girl massaging his back. And they just walked and said, "That's the guy we need."
Hopefully he can play good too, but
Yeah,
he
yeah,
looks cool.
yeah,
He's got the gear.
yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So this next album, the
This is
title,
it.
The title implies that you're going in an opposite direction.
Yeah, I don't know if we
Chosen
really,
because of
I
that.
don't know if we really did that. I mean, I think we just kind of kept pursuing things that we had already established, like, Kamikaze, no, Kamikaze was on this record or the one before. I think it was on this record.
I think it's this
It
one.
was 180. And, living on my own and biggest part of me with the R&B flavor. You're the only woman, little R&B-ish. But then we had I'm Ready, so we kind of had some rock, Shape I'm In, kind of foreigner type rock, Um, so we had a little bit of everything. I wouldn't call it a 180. I think it came out in 1980, and was the main, yeah.
Because of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound, because, yeah, I was to say, listening to it, it's definitely not much of a departure. It's just kind of the natural progression from the last album, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you find your audience started having a lot more girls in it once you started pitting these?
Oh, definitely. It definitely changed from young males to young girls.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but the young males are truer. They'll stay with you a lifetime.
That's a good point.
Young girls go to the next band.
Right, just kind of like fashion in a
Yes,
way.
exactly.
Yeah. So where was this album recorded at?
Same place. All these were at Mama Joe's.
Okay.
And we had hooked up with another engineer, Michael Verdict, on this one. So we used another studio in the Valley, his studio. I forget the name of it, but small studio. And we just, so we would work in both places at that time.
Okay. And who were you touring with around this time?
Doobie Brothers.
Okay.
People like that.
That was with Michael McDonald.
Yes, Michael was in the band. He became a great friend, and
Oh yeah, he's the epitome of yacht rock, I guess.
Yeah. But I think to call anybody yacht rock, like in the case with Ambrosia, you're looking at one side of them.
Right.
So even Michael, he's pretty expressive in a lot of genres.
Sure. Well, that's one thing I'm kind of planning on doing on next week's show, is kind of showing that even though these bands are known for yacht rock, there's a lot more to them than just that, Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Now this album I'm not really familiar with, so I was wondering.
Oh, you gotta check it out. This was during we had a meeting with a guy. We had a dinner one night with a guy from Warner Brothers. At this point, we were on Warner Brothers, the 180 and Life Beyond L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy Bob Regier at dinner one night told us, he goes, what's with the hits? He goes, I brought you here to I wanted you to come to Warner's and do the prog stuff. And we go, what? How come nobody told us that? And he goes, so I'm telling you. So what happened was we went back, and tried to get back into our more proggish headspace. And that's what this album is. And it's darker, it's much heavier.
Yeah.
And engineered by another engineer from Pink Floyd, James Guthrie, who did The Wall. He did The Wall.
Right. And the art on the cover there, that was done, is that Gerald Scarfe, the guy that did the art on The Wall?
No. I'm trying to think of his name. English. He did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, too.
Okay.
God, I'm sorry. Anyway, it'll come to me.
Yeah, it's escaping me, but
yeah, but brilliant. And so we finished the album. We handed it into Warner Brothers. During the time it took us to finish the record, Bob Regier, the guy who asked us to do it, passed away.
Oh.
So we handed it into Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers goes, "What's this? Where's the biggest part of me? You're the only woman?" They go, "What is this?" So the album didn't get the promotion that we were hoping, and soon after that, Ambrosia, we had gotten to the point where our management deal was not in our favor. It was really hard to keep the band going, so we we took a break. And then we came back, I think about 6 years after that, and I think Dave did a solo album in that meantime, and I started my family, it's like, so it was a great period because things that wouldn't have happened had we stayed as a group were allowed to happen,
Sure.
so yeah, so it was great for me personally.
Now, what are some standout tracks on this album that we should look into?
Well, just for sheer fire, Still Not Satisfied. Just rages. It's the band raging. I like Ice Age.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Ice Age Endings is kind of nice too, I think. How Can You Love Me should have been released as a single. I think it is a single. But Warner's, bands and labels and singles and all that, so much of it is luck and timing and
sure,
all those things. I mean, I think How Can You Love Me was as good a single as anything we could have put out. But the timing wasn't right, the people that were in power, Warner's, weren't looking for that sound. They were looking for something lighter, and
did the sound of kind of the rock that was happening at the time influence this album at all? Because it seems more heavy and kind of guitar oriented.
Well, I think maybe we were trying to we were kind of wilting under the definition of soft rock or whatever, and I think it was kind of our rebuttal, like, no, yeah, we can play that, and and if the songs dictate that, we can play them that way, but no, but this band can rock, and this was our statement to that effect.
Did you tour behind this album?
Very little. Very little.
Okay.
So yeah.
So
Ralph Steadman is the artist.
Okay, yeah, I know that name. Alrighty. So did why no more albums after this?
Well, okay, so we took a break for about 6 years, and by the time we got back together, we're closing in, late 80s or early, 90s. And I mean, we were so involved in our own lives and careers at that time that really it was all we could do to just get together and to go do a gig, and rehearse and do a gig. And I don't think anybody was interested in going back into that cocoon again.
Sure.
Mary and I were recording our stuff, and it just. But I have to say, we did some demos, and there's a song that we did. We tried writing, and we came up with about 5 or 6 tunes, and one song to me is the great unreleased Ambrosia tune. I think it's one of the best tunes Ambrosia ever written, and I'm hoping that it comes out eventually.
Tell her we're almost done.
So yes, and we are talking. Ambrosia, Joe, Dave, and I are talking about doing something again, because we did this whole catalog of tunes that never ever saw the light of day, and great stuff and great recordings. So we're hoping to put something together and put it out. Yeah,
that would be great. Because just looking at the discography, I would thought, well, that's kind of interesting how it stopped at 1982. I can't help but wonder if you kind of had the urge to do another one somewhere down the line.
There's been a few attempts, but it never got very far. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could happen though.
Well, fingers crossed. Well, what's next for you?
I'm having just a ball doing my family band right now, and there's a couple bands I'm producing that I play with, and Ambrosia will be back on the road. Probably, it's probably going to be mid-year next year, and hopefully.
Well, I will definitely look you up when you come through Atlanta.
Absolutely.
Records for years, and your bucket list. I haven't actually seen you live, so I'm dying to.
Oh, you gotta see the band.
I would love to. City Winery or wherever you play when you come to town here. I'll definitely look you up and.
Okay, man.
We can have a bite to eat or something.
That would be wonderful.
That'd be great. Well, I got a couple things in the chat room I just wanted to share, and then we'll wrap it up real quick.
Okay.
My friend Paul Watson said, please let Burleigh know Ambrosia was very big down here in the 1970s in New Zealand.
Oh my gosh.
He said
I
it
mean,
was,
we'll tell him. My wife and I went there last year, and that's one of the places we want to live for some period of time, if we can.
well, there you go. You hear that,
Yeah,
Paul?
no.
We'll
Well,
help them
we
find some
went,
real estate.
yeah, well, that was my wife's bucket list to go to New Zealand, and finally, both her parents passed away a couple of years ago, so I promised her we'll go to New Zealand,
Okay,
and
well, all
it
right.
was wonderful. Oh, it was wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, what a
Yeah.
neat place. He said that was the theme music for his summer of 1975. Just about every radio station at night was playing "Holding On to Yesterday." Enjoyed the interview. So
Oh,
pretty
thanks.
cool.
Thank you,
And
man.
and my friend Mike Ostrom says about the Life Beyond L.A. was out. My mom gave me one signed by Burleigh.
Oh,
Good memory. Cool album. I wish I knew where it is now. I have it on CD, but that autograph cover is long gone. Oh,
oh,
oh well.
oh.
Who knows? Maybe we can hook him up with another one someday.
Sure,
No
absolutely.
doubt. All right. Well, thanks so much for being part of Soul Night Live. I've
Hey,
been a big fan for many years, and it's such a treat to get to talk about the nuts and bolts of discography with you.
well, my pleasure, man. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
All righty. Well, let's do it again sometime.
Anytime.
All right.
Sounds
Well,
good.
take care. And y'all tune in next week. My guest is Greg Lee from the Yacht Rock Review. We will be talking about the history of yacht rock. So we're going to find out if Captain and Tennille slot in there. I think some of these yacht rock guys get in just because they wear captain's hats or write songs about boats. So I'm going to get to the bottom of this. What do you think?
Yeah, man.
We'll find out. All righty. Anything you want to say before we take off, your audience?
No, just look forward to making more music, and I hope I see everybody out there on the road sometime.
Absolutely. Here's to a good 2021. Onward and upward.
Yeah, buddy.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, Burley.
Bye, man.
All right. Take care. Good night.